Welcome to Seamarama panel discussion on the documentary film Burden of Peace. We are so honored to have the film's director, Joey Boink, with us today, as well as Sandra Pepera, who is the director for Gender, Women, and Democracy at the National Democratic Institute. We'll be joined in a few minutes by Patricia Sellers. She's having a little trouble logging on, but she is an international criminal attorney. We're looking forward to having her join us. Burden of Peace, if you haven't seen it, is a very moving, often graphic and disturbing film about Claudia Paz y Paz, Guatemala's first female attorney general, and her struggle to bring justice to the Guatemalan legal system. Just as a side note, Paz y Paz in Spanish means peace and peace. It's a very fitting last name for her, I believe. I'm so honored to moderate this discussion today. I've spent a lot of time in Guatemala, and so it's a lovely country, and I'm always impressed by the tenacity of people to fight for their rights and maintain their dreams, often against really difficult odds and in very tough circumstances. So I'd like to take a minute to introduce myself, and then to turn it over to each of you to introduce yourselves a little further. My name is Jennifer Geist, and I'm a teacher. I've been working in the field of global education for almost 20 years, and I started a consulting collaborative called Zeitgeist Creations in 2010 to help other educators bring more diverse and inclusive perspectives into their classrooms, especially through digital technology, connecting with other classrooms around the world, and what I call eyes wide open media, such as Seamarama and Seama Classroom. I'm a huge fan of this organization and what they make available to educators around the world. So I especially want to welcome teachers and students who are watching today. I believe that telling stories of struggle and perseverance give us needed inspiration, hope, and sometimes even some direction in our lives. So our panel today has so much to share with us about these topics and more. And I'd like to ask each of you now to introduce yourselves and tell us about your connection to the film. And maybe Joey, we can start with you.
Hi. Yeah. Well, thank you for the introduction. I also feel honored to be on this panel, and I feel honored that the film Burden of Peace gets so much attention by Seamarama. So thank you all for that. And thank you for watching. My name is Joey Boink. I'm the director of Burden of Peace, the documentary we made and finished in 2015. In this documentary, we follow the previous Attorney General, Claudia Paz y Paz of Guatemala. And well, I'm to start by telling something about myself. I'm a political scientist and master in international development studies. And already during my studies, I started filmmaking. So I always try to combine political and social issues with film, with telling stories in film, in documentary. And I did my I've lived for a while in Guatemala, and while living in Guatemala, I noticed how what a deep impact crime and corruption has on the society, on every level of society, on girls, boys, older people, everyone. If you are not in a gang, there is you have a brother or a sister that is being pressured by gang violence, for example. And while living in Guatemala, I came across Claudia Paz y Paz, who was then trying to become the Attorney General of the country. And that was a very hopeful period, because she was the first person that was really dedicated to change the country. And that's when I got interested to follow her. So that's a little bit about myself and how I came to the idea of making a documentary.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Sandra, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit how you come to this topic in this film?
Great. Well, thank you so much. And thanks to SEMA for inviting the National Democratic Institute to be part of this podcast. And I hope that we'll be able to engage more often as the films come out. So NDI, the National Democratic Institute, is a democracy assistance institute. We are really a network of democratic activists. And we have offices and a presence in about 50 countries around the world. And we're probably working with democratic activists in a further 5 or 6 where we can't be present for obvious reasons. We've been in Guatemala for about 30 years already. I haven't been there, so I'm interested in this, but I have heard, of course, and read about Claudia Paz, who is a beacon and an icon for the struggle for rights and democratic rights, but also for women and the marginalized. And that really just shines through in the film. From our point of view at NDI, we have a mission to support democratic consolidation where people wish it. We are not imposing it on anybody. We don't have a blueprint about what democracy looks like, but we do support certain basic principles of democratic participation. So I think inclusion, accountability, participation itself, empowerment. These are the sorts of things that we focus on here at NDI. And a big part of that is working to get women more fully integrated into the political arena. We say it's the highest hurdle. It seems to be the most difficult hurdle, but it's also one of the most important. And we've been focusing here at MDI for the last 2.5 years on how violence prevents women from participating. And Joey talked about the generalized violence in Guatemala. That's one part of it. But we've also seen that women are being directly targeted to prevent their participation in the political life of their countries. So that's been a big campaign issue for us. We have the Not the Cost campaign, because all too often women are told it's the cost of being in politics, sort of put up and shut up. If it's too hot, get out of the kitchen. But we say, no, it's not the cost. And that's been our campaign for the last 2 years. So thank you very much for having us, and looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much. That's I so appreciate that your work, and I feel just suddenly a little bit choked up because I think about some of the women that I actually know in Guatemala who would love to step up and who have all the talent and capacity and compassion to step up, but they fear for their lives, and they fear for their lives of their family, and so when we talk about comfort zone and a place like Guatemala, we're really talking about a really different level of discomfort to step into the political arena. And that's not to depict Guatemala as all violence all the time. It certainly is not. It's there's a lot. It's a very complex place, but we're here today to talk about the violence and the legal system. So thank you. Were you going to say something else there?
Only to say, and I'm sorry, the podcasting. Just to say, your point is very, very accurate. The differentiated impact of violence on men and women, and what it does to your perception of your ability to engage in, frankly, normal life.
Yes.
That is hugely important, and I think we can come and talk a bit more about that as we go through.
Excellent, great, thank you. I think it's important at this point. We don't know how many of our viewers today have actually seen the film yet. And so I would like to ask you, Joey, to sort of give us a synopsis. You've already sort of given us some of the a peek into the film, but just a synopsis of kind of the storyline and a little bit about the historical context, including the trial that takes place during the 3 years that you were filming.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, the starting point of the film and of our participation in Guatemala in the film was the fact that only 2% of the killings was solved in a country where um, every year more than 6,000 people are killed. And it is a small country, but there are more homicides than in the whole European Union altogether. So that fact is where the film starts. How is this woman that is just being elected attorney general going to change that, and how is she going to make her country more safe? Um, she focuses on. Uh, so we are going with her on her mission because she gave us full access and to the public prosecutor's office. So on all levels. Um, so we are going with her on her mission, and she starts by changing the current system. She starts by getting the corrupt officers out, by motivating a lot of the prosecutors that weren't motivated, that didn't know what to do because they never got instructions, because um, the former attorney generals were there more for their own businesses to clean their own hands than to really change and improve the country. So she introduced a system, and but she notices that if you really want to change the culture of corruption and the culture of crime and the culture of gender inequality, um, you need to make you need to change the culture. And so she also says we should um, judge the people who committed uh, crimes against humanity in the 1980s and that have been still in power, or their friends are still in power. Um, Only then people believe that in a fair society. Because if people say, yeah, why should I, for example, why should I pay taxes if the people in power use my money to only for their own benefits? Or why should I go to the police for being raped if the police will only judge me instead of the perpetrator? Those that culture was something that she wanted to change, and that's, for example, why she introduced the punishment of sexual violence for the first time. Before, it was not possible to go to the police if your husband in your house would perpetrate you as a woman. She changed that. But to change the culture of corruption, she arrested former dictators and former militaries. I mean, the thing is that of the 1980s. Oh, sorry. I think
It's
there's
okay. Go ahead.
some. Okay, I can
Just a
go.
little glitch. Yeah.
All right. So, and when she does that, when she arrests the former presidents, that's when she really gets in a conflict, because the actual president is a former military. So she gets to do. She gets confronted with a black campaign against her, making her people who are trying to criminalize her, trying to get her out of office. But she keeps on fighting to get these former militaries behind the bars for genocide, and that's the climax of the film. Um, the In the end, the judge does um, uh, the judge concludes that there has been a genocide, and that Rios Montt, the former general and president of 1982, was responsible for the killing of thousands of Mayan people. But a few days later, another judge cancels the whole verdict, and he says that that the uh, that the process had been illegal, or that there had been made a mistake. So the former dictator gets free, and after all this pressure, also Claudia Passipas herself, her period her as attorney general is shortened, and she has to leave office. So that's that's the synopsis of the film. That's basically, in short, the time of 3 years that we followed her. So at the final day of filming, we left the country together with her.
Oh, you did? Wow.
Yeah, yeah, she
Wow.
had to leave.
She had to leave.
And when you leave office, you don't get security anymore. So she decided to well flee out of the country.
Well, yeah, and I know she has a family, and many of the scenes in the film are of her driving to and from work with a full security detail.
Yeah, that's true. Also, her boy of then 6 years old was got security, and her husband.
And her husband. That must have been incredible to travel with her. Did she? How normal did that become for her to have that level of security, or to know that every day when she left her house she was in danger? Does that ever become normal?
I don't think so. She is not the standard political person, or she's not the standard police officer. Um, Although she got in that very powerful position. She became there because she wanted to fight for her country as a human rights defender. So she was. She always remained humble, and I think it was very hard for her to get used to this system of getting into the jeep, being escorted by so many security personnel, and she also wanted the personnel to 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 have a certain distance for her boy, because she didn't want her boy to get used to that life.
Yeah.
But I think it has been very hard for her. Um Although I got to know some of the people of the security personnel, and I also know how respectful they were towards her, and they would uh, get a bullet. They would catch a bullet to save her life.
Wow.
So those people were also very dedicated.
Wow. I wonder, Sandra, is this a familiar story to you? Is this the experience of many women who rise to higher positions in particularly in countries with rocky democracies, and also not only is it their experience, but that personality or temperament that Joey describes that also really comes through in the film. And she's a very mild-mannered woman, but obviously with incredible perseverance and conviction and tenacity. It's such an interesting combination. Do you come across that a lot in the women that you work with?
Well, I'm always careful about not essentializing women. You know, we're not saints, but actually, a lot of women do put themselves at considerable risk, often and often. And what Joey described there, the issues around underreporting of the violence, the issues around impunity that she was fighting against,
Yes.
The issues around how her perspective on personal security was so intimately bound up with her family. You know, this is what makes it a different issue than for a man, and I think that's what we've understood that whilst there are places where there is political violence, that's different from violence against women in politics, because that second has a very gendered focus. It's gendered in its content, it's gendered in its impact, and it targets women specifically. So let me give you an example. In Uganda in 2016, the opposition party went out on a rally, and Uganda being the political environment it is, of course, they were, if you like, manhandled by the security forces. There was a woman in the leadership of the group there, and up until the point where everybody was being manhandled, that's political violence. But when they took her aside and stripped her naked in public, now we're talking about something quite different.
Quite different.
We're talking about a gendered attack that is really saying, don't come out here. This is not the space for you as a woman. So I think we are beginning to understand the complexities of these things as they impact women at the individual level, but also, again, Joey very much painted the political context of Guatemala. We know that different political contexts have different impacts on women's ability to step forward into politics. So, if you have a closed and semi-authoritarian space, this is problematic because a lot of women come through civil society. And if civil society isn't able to act, then you're stifling women's participation. Similarly, a lot of these closed and authoritarian spaces have frankly regressive norms as far as women are concerned. So you're seeing that women policy on equality, they are usually quite systematically rolled back in those contexts with impacts on women and their ability to participate. So these are the sorts of things that we are focused on at NDI. But there are many brave women around the world. I think in the last month, we all mourned Marielle Franco in Brazil. And over the last few years, there's been Berta Cáceres and Hafsa Moussi in Burundi, probably somebody you've never heard of, and Jo Cox in the United Kingdom. So all these women are women who've actually paid the ultimate price for doing what is actually A, their human right, B, their civil and political right, and C, their contribution to strengthening democratic integrity around the world. So we know that women are being resisted. We know that what we call there's a backlash. It seems almost as if as more and more women step forward into the political arena, there is an increasing hostility towards them, and that becomes problematic. And Joey, I know that some of the assaults and harassment that Claudia Pagli-Paris would have received would have been hugely sexualized and really playing on tropes and some of those caricatures around women's place and women's access to political power.
Okay, great. There's, you're reminding me of a couple of scenes in the film. And there's one towards the beginning in her first year. One of the first things that she sets up is is an agency where women can come in and report violence against them. That scene astonished me, that so many women actually came forward. And of course, that's in the filmmaker's hands to show how busy or not busy that agency actually is. And we don't know what the net result of her having set up that agency is, but it is that stepping forward and a place to go. And I found myself very curious about how did Claudia Pagli-Paris create that agency and create the safety for women to come in. And in that, that's sort of a first step for many, is to come in and denounce their perpetrators, and then the empowerment that comes with that. And I just wondered if both of you, if you could talk a little bit about when women come into power and they do take on women's issues. And of course, as you said, they're not only criticized for that, the pushback is much stronger. How do they manage to create those places? Is it or create that new culture? How do you invent that culture of safety for women?
I think well, there's policy making, so that's one important step.
Was that what she did? Did she begin with policy?
Yeah. She began with policy, but also to get the policy to work, you need to make some changes in behavior. So, for example, um, she would always send woman officers to those places where crimes had happened,
Okay.
sexual crimes, so that people, witnesses, would feel more safe to talk about what happened to them. So those small steps were, I think, very important. And by showing that you can be a woman in that position, that
Yeah.
is also a very important step to inspire other women to grow. And she wouldn't deny. Well, she was proud to say that as a woman, that she was a woman on that position and that she was the first attorney general, although she would always say that it wasn't for her gender that she got there, but it was because, well, it is obvious she was the best qualified person to get on that position. And um, the most important struggles she had, I think, was, well, people would say that she had she had relationships with other people, and those kinds of attacks are attacks that a man wouldn't get. So that's something that Sandra was talking about. The typical kind of attacks that you get as a woman were things like that. But also, I think she was very. She didn't want to show her emotions, and that is also something, as a director of the film, I struggled with sometimes, because I want people in my film to be open and outspoken. But I think because of being a woman, she was afraid that she would be attacked in the media or by other people for showing emotions, because that's a typical woman thing, you know. And so she would always be very straightforward and not showing emotions and not being attacked on that level. Um, so that's I think a very yeah, good examples of how gender works in Guatemala in this situation.
Oh.
I mean, from my point of view, again, to pick up Joey was talking about policy reform and policy change. I think that is part of it. But let's be clear, it's more often that policy reform and policy change is accomplished in the ways that, for example, Claudia managed in Guatemala. What we know is that in certain political contexts, there are moments of opportunity when you can make a big step forward. The window is often short, but you can actually, make a giant step. I think the other part of it is, we work a lot with the Organization of American States and the SECI, that is the Convention mechanism. And they've, for example, just last month, published a model law on the prevention, punishment, and outlawing of violence against women in political office. So we know that in Latin America, the legal route is one that is very strongly held on to. Bolivia was actually the first country in the world to legally outlaw violence against women who are in politics. So my skeptical mind always says that in those situations where they talk about the general levels of honesty, where if you like there is a generalized attack and assault on women, passing another law may not be the most useful thing, but setting up the right institutional responses, ensuring that women do have somewhere to go, that there are safe havens, ensuring that the legal services understand that this shouldn't be happening. I think all those things are really, really important. But it's necessary but not sufficient. Yeah, it's necessary.
Yeah. There's one scene in the film where a woman is thanking Claudia for helping her seek justice. I believe it was for the murder of her husband or something, and a child.
Her daughter, yeah.
And it's a very emotional scene, regardless of how much Claudia shows. And it's sort of that moment where you see that it is through women's solidarity that that women get courage. And not to say there isn't an enormous role from men, but that's a very poignant scene for me, to sort of see what Claudia Passipas meant to one particular individual woman, and only imagining how many thousands more. We just have another minute or two, and I really would like to give each of you a chance to say anything else that you feel was missing from this dialogue. There's so much to talk about here, and had Patricia been able to join us, I would have liked to have jumped into some of the more of the stuff about the trial and genocide and criminal law. But I'm really glad that we got to focus so much on this issue of women in politics, and to have you, Sandra, to talk to about it. And I want to know specifically if there's any way that we can ensure what we can do, the rest of the world, to ensure that women can be politically active. Where do we come in as global citizens?
Yeah, no, it's really hard. I mean, if we didn't know it before, the Me Too movement has shown us just how difficult it is for women to talk about the harassment and discrimination and assault they face. And it's almost doubly difficult for women in politics, because everybody thinks that they have a lot of power. They're also members of, frankly, frat type organizations. Political parties are very male and very male dominated, and they find it difficult to actually speak out against some of the harassment and violence they face from their own party colleagues sometimes, because that's seen as being unreliable, or you're giving political ammunition to your opponents, and so forth and so on. So there are sort of multiple layers when it comes to women who are politically active. I think the key thing is, Jennifer, you made the point, a lot more men have to call out this behavior when they see it. They have to move from being bystanders to being activists on the issue. So that's one key element. And I think the other point is, it's like it really is time. It really, really is that we move forward in a more concerted way towards the representation and the influence and power that women should have. That means, I'm really, really sorry to tell you, a lot of men are going to have to step back, because they're just taking calling it out. If you're in a political party, if you're in a social movement, if you're in a parliament, if you are in a place, make sure that you're not enabling violence to take place against the women who are trying to engage in politics.
Very good. And if you're a filmmaker, leave in those scenes of what men will only share with other men, perhaps, but what happens behind closed doors. I appreciate those scenes very much, Joey. And do you have something you want to add to that as we close up here, Joey?
Yeah, I just want to say that the woman that that became Attorney General after Claudia Pazzipas has done some amazing work as well. We didn't expect that to happen because Claudia had to leave office, and the president, the former military, he assigned this woman that was more out of his backyard,
Mm-hmm.
but she showed that she was able to work independently, and she got her boss, the president, behind bars. And she has done amazing work. She continued the efforts of Claudia, and she also is under a lot of pressure. And I hope that people who saw this movie or saw this discussion will be interested to follow the current news in Guatemala, because there's still a lot to do and a lot to improve. And I hope that people like Thelma Aldana, the current Attorney General, will receive support internationally. And in 2 weeks, there will be a new Attorney General, because the term of Aldana has finished. Her 4 years are over. So let's hope that the new Attorney General will also be a transparent person, and that they get the right support that they
Right.
need.
And the protection to do their job.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I really am so grateful for this conversation. I wish we had some more time, but I appreciate all the time that you've given so far. To viewers, if you haven't seen the documentary yet, you can watch it until the end of the month at cimarama.club. And you can also, there's an take action button, and a lot of the things that were referred to today in this panel discussion and a lot more information is available there. There are books, other videos and films, news reports. So if you're interested in any of these topics, you can find lots of resources there. Take an action. And I just want to thank you. This has really been an incredible, thank you for your work in the world. Very grateful.
Thank you.
Nice to
Okay.
meet you.
Take care.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet
Bye.
you. Take care.